Cliches retire, we set them free, shaking the ground with epiphany. Fresh thinking loud, it's our decree. Unconventional wisdom dancing on the beat.
Hello, and welcome to Unconventional Wisdom, about conventional wisdom. I cannot wait for you to meet my guest today, Michael Haskell of Navitas. I'm going to give him an opportunity to introduce himself and what he does. And here's the fun thing. I don't know where you're listening, but currently Michael is in Hong Kong, and he's got quite an interesting story about the different places that he's lived and done business, which I think you will want to stay tuned for. Michael, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you very much, Kim. I appreciate you having me. I am coming to you from Asia Pacific, where I spend the majority of my time now. Navitas Consulting is a business that's based in Singapore. So that's where the business calls home. But myself and my business partner in that business move around Asia Pacific a bit. So we do spend some time in Singapore, but also in Philippines, Japan, Hong Kong, New Zealand, Australia, those sorts of places too. Navitas helps business owners grow their business and become more profitable. So we do that primarily through two pathways. We provide finance team personnel. So that's everything from accounts people up through CPAs and even virtual CFO services. And then we also provide IT professionals to you as well. So the way the business would work is the client in the US, actually, most of our clients are in the US, but the client in the US signs a supplier agreement, services agreement with us, the Singapore entity, Navitas Consulting in Singapore, for specific skills. We go out in Southeast Asia and find those skills at a lower cost than you can find those skills wherever you are, assuming a few places on the planet that are as inexpensive, some places in Eastern Europe. But for most of your listeners, I'm guessing they're going to be in a higher wage market. So we help them grow their business by finding the right resources at the right cost.
Which I love what you said about that, because I think there is really some misinformation out there around offshoring talent, that somehow it also means an inferior level of service or level of knowledge. I mean, you could have that happen in the United States. You could have that happen anywhere, right? You could have it happen in the United States. You can have it happen anywhere. But I think there's lots of really smart people out there who are looking for opportunities in the same way that there are in the US.
100%. And you definitely find in some of the lower wage, what we call developing world countries, where there are not as many sociological safety nets for being financially supported if you aren't out working your hardest. A lot of these countries don't have the additional tax receipts to be able to provide that kind of safety net. And in a lot of these places, the jobs you're creating are what's allowing the family to put food on the table, sort of thing. So not only are you doing a great job from a job creation standpoint, but you've got their attention too.
And I will just say that my team, I have 3 people who work for me. They actually all live in Nigeria, and they are some of the brightest, hardest working, dedicated, and honestly, super fun and like just wonderful people. And yeah, I love working with them. I just love working with them. And I am sure that it is the same for the people that you find as well.
Yeah, by and large, it is, right? So the vast majority of our clients have been happy. We've only been going since 2021, so I guess about 4.5 years now. But some of our first placements are still with the client, right? So that's usually a good sign.
Absolutely. All right, Michael, I have your random question here. So the random question for you is, what advice would you give your younger self?
Okay, so there'd be a lot for sure. Probably the single most important one, unless you have reason to learn it earlier in life, and thankfully, touch wood, I didn't. One thing you probably don't really start paying attention to until middle age. So I'm 45 now. So middle age is really that your health is material to everything you're doing. And in many ways, as a younger entrepreneur, my entire focus was on my wealth build, right? But it wasn't until my 40s where I realized the wealth is all well and good, but if you don't look after your health, the wealth is almost irrelevant. I guess in theory, yeah, you can afford the best doctors, but you don't want to use them, right? So look after your health as a younger person, because Warren Buffett talks about interest compounding, health compounds, right? If you make a lot of good decisions, that will be compounded over time. If you make a lot of poor decisions, that will be compounded over time. So if I had a 25-year-old me, I would remind me to eat and try to get enough sleep and try not to overextend myself too much.
I love that. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Health is very important. I actually think if I had to give my younger self some advice, I'm just going to cop to this, right? I am somebody who, like, I like to be liked, right? And sometimes I think too much, right? And so if I had to give my younger self advice, it would be don't care so much
Mm,
about what other people think about you, and really
mm,
put your time and energy into shoring yourself up and being confident, like, internally, and giving yourself what you need, and your people are going to find you, right?
mhm.
And listen, here's the difference right now. I am 100% not everybody's cup of tea, and
Right?
I am 100% okay with that,
Yeah.
right? And also, too, I think it's a funny thing, and I don't know if you relate to this or not. I want to be liked by everybody, but let me just tell you, Michael, I'm super judgy. I
Right.
don't like, I am very clear about who I like and who I don't like, but
Right.
everybody has to like me.
Yeah.
And so I think my younger self would not care so much about that.
100%. That is excellent advice. And you're right. No matter what you do or how much success you have or how good to people you are, you're never going to rub 100% of the people the right way all the time.
That's right.
And getting comfortable with that and having the self-awareness, I think of that's massive. And that's also something you probably, or most people don't have in their 20s.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you for that. All
Sure.
right, so let's get into the conventional wisdom first versus unconventional wisdom. I don't recall if you had a corporate career before you had an entrepreneurial career, but I am curious about the conventional wisdom that you thought was going to make you successful in your life, and then what have you really learned? You've got this business, you've got some other businesses too. You've been an entrepreneur, you've been in wealth building mode. Like what do you really know now that is really the key to your success?
That would be unconventional. So I think by and large, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially if they're going to attempt to create a new product or a new market, right? So you could have a lot of financial success, a lot of business success duplicating something that's already out there in the marketplace and working well.
Sure.
But if you are going to go down the path where you're going to try to do something relatively new, or at least it's new in that part of the world, so to speak, you do have to question, I think, a lot of the established pathways, right? And you're going to be told by the established authorities that the way you're doing it isn't. I've been told many times, oh no, we don't need that here, we're just fine. If you're not questioning the way the establishment works, then it's really hard to create and innovate. So I think most entrepreneurs that go down that pathway already have to have an unorthodox way of thinking. For me, it started early, even where I decided to do business. I grew up on the East Coast of the States. I was born in Annapolis, Maryland. I did my education time down in South Carolina, but then I left the US in 2005 to come out to Asia Pacific and to scout because I was of the view that Asia Pacific was probably going to offer more opportunity than the East Coast of the US over the next, back then as a 24, 25-year-old, you're only thinking in long term as 5 years. You're not thinking in decades yet. You're too young. But I was thinking for the next 5 years, probably Asia Pacific will offer me more opportunity. That was my initial scout. time. And then I went back, and then I got everything in order, and then moved out to Asia Pacific full time, and haven't lived in the US again in 2007. Right before the GFC, I sold my condo, I sold my rental property. I didn't have a crystal ball. I just got lucky at the right time because I needed cash for my first business in New Zealand, right? So I just sold up and made a go of it down there, and gradually had some success. It wasn't overnight. So that's the other thing. There are some entrepreneurs that just seem to kind of be in the right place at the right time. And maybe Zuckerberg was in the right place at the right time, and just everything went well, and there was billions of dollars before you know it. But for most business builders, it's a slow and steady journey. And I was in New Zealand for 7 years before I had any real success in the way I would define it now. But my goal when I first left was to have an adventure, see the world a bit, right? But also be able to create the life that I wanted, right? I wanted to be able to create businesses that would facilitate the life that I wanted. And I guess one of the biggest things I've learned over the 20 years that would, I guess for most people, still be slightly unorthodox would be everybody thinks that what makes a good business is having a great idea. My view would be it's actually having the best people, right? So I've seen so many times exceptional people be able to take an average to pretty good idea and make it into an exceptional business. And I've seen some average to below average people take exceptional ideas and drive them into the pavement. So, now what I know in my mid 40s after some financial success and some business success that I wouldn't have known at 25. At 25, I still would have thought it was all about the idea. I got the best idea, therefore we'll be fine. No, not so much.
And you're really getting into my world in the sense of if everybody followed your advice, I would be out of business. Because if actually that isn't true, because as a business coach, wouldn't that be amazing if people only hired me to go from good to great or
Sure.
from great to even better, right? That would be something. That is not typically when they bring me in. They bring
Right.
me in when they have a great idea and they're having issues with management and leadership.
100%. I've been a part of organizations that have struggled with their personnel. I've found solutions in organizations for that. But when the dust settles, you really want to get involved with business partners from a founding team. You want to have complementary skills, but you don't want to have values and worldviews that are substantially different
Yeah.
because it just makes it really hard.
Yeah, exactly. And I have listened to a number of podcasts of founders of large businesses who parted with their partners because the values didn't align. Right? And those are really painful things, especially if the business goes on to be successful. And then the old business partners come back and they want a piece of it.
Sure.
And there was a misalignment there. I think those are really challenging and they're heartbreaking. That's the
Oh, yeah.
thing. I was listening to a podcast actually, even just a couple of days ago, with Cynthia Tice, who founded Chocolate. It's chocolate that doesn't have a sugar in it.
Okay.
She was telling the story of a business partner who opted out of the business, and then when the business became successful came back and wanted a piece of it, and they litigated for 2 years.
Yep.
And I guess you could say that like Cynthia Tice won, and that I'm doing air quotes because she won the legal battle, but she didn't win. She might have won monetarily, but it wasn't a win. The toll and I think the knowing that you have somebody out there in the world who really feels like you treated them unfairly and all those things, those are hard things to live with.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. And even if you do win financially in litigation, you have just as many sleepless nights as the guy or the gal that didn't win,
That's
right? While it's ongoing. And those things, until I guess our lawyers, our solicitors, and our barristers and our judges are replaced by AI in 15 years, that process is still a multi-year adventure. So
Right.
you want to stay as far away from it as possible.
Yeah. And I think what you said, I'm sorry, I took this down a deep and black hole here, but I think to put it in the positive, which is really where you started, which is that it is important to really be culturally aligned with your business partners, right? Actually, one of the exercises that I typically do with either new partners or founders, or oftentimes even as you're bringing the team on, is something called like a user manual to me, where it's very short, 6 or 7 questions. You each fill it out. And it's so interesting to have a foundational document that really says one of the things on there is these are ways not to communicate with me. Don't ever, I don't know about you, Michael. Like, you'll tell me in a minute, like, what your thing is. My thing is, don't tell me what to do. It doesn't matter whether it makes 100% sense. If you phrase it that you are telling me what to do, I'm going to have a not good reaction to that every single time. So, what's your don't ever do this to me? What's yours?
Oh, so I like to have my boundaries respected for sure. Things such as if it's an emergency and you need to call my cell number, it's an emergency, no problem. But I don't want to have a unscheduled call to pitch me an idea, right? I want you to respect my boundaries. And of course, I'm prepared to respect everybody else's. I would say that turns me off pretty quick. Because again, so with Navitas Consulting, we help other business owners and founding teams build their businesses. But I
Sure.
also invest in startups, right? And when you're investing in startups and you're getting to know a founding team, you're always looking for tells. And you're trying to observe as much as you possibly can because you've got a small sample size, right? You're going to have to make a decision on whether you pull the trigger or whether you pass with a relatively small amount of data, right? So you're always looking for things that kind of tip you in one direction or the other. And those are the sorts of things that you would look. You look at the dynamic between them, you look at how they communicate, you look at do they have good structure and boundaries. All of those things come into play.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And they say, is this true for you? Because I'm not an investor, but oftentimes what I hear is that investors are really, especially at a very early stage, you're investing either in a seed round or an A round, you're investing in the founder more than you're investing in the business. Is that
I
true
would
for
say
you?
100%. So
Yeah.
the founding team, the initial folks they've brought on board to help them build the business, how long have they known them? What do the relationships look like? Where do these relationships start? Have they worked together in the past? What were the outcomes? You're looking at all those sorts of things because at least right now, still the most important input, as we talked about earlier in the conversation, is the quality of the human beings. And then, of course, you're looking at the longevity of their relationships. Have they been able to be respectful and work together with one another for many years? Or have they gotten together 6 weeks ago and haven't met one another's families yet? Like where is the dynamic? So you're definitely paying attention to those things.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's me ask you this. So you've got a number of businesses, you're an investor, you've got the consulting business, and you have a level of success, right? What is one thing that you still struggle with, and maybe something that might surprise people?
Again, there are lots of things that I struggle with, but I think probably as a younger man, so there was a time in my life when I had neither money or time, right? And then there was a period of my life where I finally started to have some money, but didn't have any time. I was working incredibly long hours. Now, probably for the last half a decade or so, I've had a reasonable amount of time. I've been able to find financial freedom. And I think probably one of the challenges is how do I prioritize how to invest my time? What am I going to go get? Or am I going to go try to improve my golf score? Am I going to take an AI course? What am I going to do to continue to develop and to continue to evolve and to be able to add value to my family and my friends and other businesses that I'm involved with? How am I going to allocate my time? would probably be one of the more interesting day-to-day thoughts.
And is there any, I think what I want to ask you, is there any self-esteem that is connected to how you spend your time? In other words, if you are deciding between improving your golf game or taking a course in AI, is there anything there? Is it really just which one would I enjoy more? Or is there any either ego or self-esteem tied up in becoming an expert in either one of those things?
So I probably don't have the gray matter to ever become an AI expert. So I've hung up the spurs in that endeavor. I've gone from having business building be like my vehicle to gain financial freedom, right? But along the way, along the years of building business, I actually find that I really enjoy it. And I enjoy helping other people build their businesses. I enjoy building my businesses. The companies that I'm invested in, either as a shareholder or as a shareholder director, right? If I'm just a shareholder, I'm not really counted on to contribute, but I still try to, right? If they'll have me, because I really to contribute and I like to build. That is more fun for me. If I were considering upskilling intellectually, while recognizing I'm never going to be an AI genius, but if I want to upscale intellectually, I would probably take that over, say, improving my golf game. I'd try to find time for both if I could, but I would probably take that first because it has more of a impact in other components of my life, right? So the more competent I am, the more developed I am, the better I am as a family member, the better I am as a father, or the better I am as a business partner. Whereas improving the golf swing is more kind of like just for that. It doesn't have a lot of knock-on effects. So I would probably, and I do, read more than I golf. So that would probably give you the answer.
Cool. All right. Thank you for that. And as a successful business leader, if you could rewrite the rule book on leadership, what's one outdated belief that you'd throw out? And then what would you replace it with?
Ooh, so outdated beliefs. So I've been a part of, let's maybe use an example at the governance board level and then a small business startup level. An outdated view on a board level, and I've seen this so many times, is that boards spend a lot of time trying to get to consensus, right? And consensus is not as important as pace and quality of decision making. Oftentimes, if you have to talk around an idea for weeks and weeks, and I'm not saying rush and do something in 12 seconds that does need 24 hours or 36 hours, but I've been involved with a lot of organizations that prioritize making sure everybody likes the same idea rather than let's make a prompt, good decision. And if it doesn't end up being the best decision, we can pivot later. That's a massive mistake that boards make and senior management teams make. And on a startup space, man, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people still making, and I never quite bought into the VC mindset that top line revenue growth was everything, that basically go ahead, sell your product or your service at far below what it costs you to produce it, just as long as you can sell enough of them to triple revenue every year. I was never a believer in that. And it's probably a little less cool now than it would have been, say, 5 or 6 years ago. But there are still a lot of people that do think as long as I am scaling top line revenue, that the rest doesn't really matter. I would say it does matter. And the view that it doesn't would be an error. And it matters for so many reasons, right? If you're burning cash rather than accumulating cash, you are entirely reliant on external funding. So you are no longer the market maker. You're the market taker, right? Everybody that's investing in your business is going to dictate to you what your business is worth and what the people inside your business are worth. You're no longer calling the shots. But if you can continue to grow fast and accumulate money on a monthly or a quarterly basis, however you traditionally measure, you've got all the cards in your hand and you're in a great spot. So give me a startup that doubles revenue but stays profitable before you give me a startup that quadruples revenue and burns cash on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. So I would say those two things would be ways of looking at things differently than what most people probably would consider to be the current business as usual or status quo.
And I think to go back to one of the points that you made at the beginning, which is that people matter. And in the VC world, or at least in the private equity world these days, that I know a number of professionals whose companies have been bought up by private equity. And people seem to be rather superfluous to that relative to what is the top line. And they it's not a lot of times it feels like it's not even they just want what they want. It's not
Right.
related to what the company can actually produce. It's just this is how we penciled this deal out. So we need this revenue by this time. And if we drive the people into the ground, they're not the investors. So we don't have an allegiance to them.
100% there on the people. The other thing sometimes when you get VCs or private equity, obviously you usually likes to come in and take a majority share or all. But with VCs, they'll come in and take a minority share. Sometimes because they've got such loud voices and such big checkbooks, you end up with small minority shareholders, 5, 6, 8, 10% of a company, almost setting strategy because they've got the loudest voice and they can, and if you let them, bullies maybe too strong a word, but pressure. If you let them pressure you, oftentimes they will. And if you're not accumulating money, they've got every opportunity in the world because you're reliant on them.
That's
Right.
right.
So you
Yeah.
you will facilitate them in pressuring you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, that's an interesting observation, and I think very true, right? Because also too, a lot of times these companies are not big enough to have a CFO. You either need to have a CEO who really understands the finances, or you need to use something like Navitas to
Mhm.
bring in the resources early enough to really get the strategy and the sort of tactical pieces in place so that you don't find yourself. And guess what? How much money you have in the bank is not a financial strategy.
No,
Shocking. I
certainly
know.
not.
And that isn't even the side of the business that I coach on. But I will tell you that I do have clients who, if they've got money in the bank, that is literally their financial strategy until that changes. And then all of a sudden, they're all of a sudden then looking at their books.
And revenue, your clients can go away fast, right? Revenue can dry up quickly when most of your liabilities, especially your liabilities to your employees, your lease liabilities, these are contingent liabilities with long tails. You'd be amazed at how fast businesses can fall apart when the revenue tap gets turned off, even if it's just a sluggish month of trading. You really want to pay more attention than just the bank balance and have things war chested and set aside in case bad things happen, because of course people think bad things will never happen, but then if they do they think they'll be super temporary. It's just these
Right.
internal biases we have, and most people are just not really prepared for setbacks.
Exactly. And this is not for us to have a political conversation here, but I think it's with tariffs, people were not prepared
Mhm.
for the effect that was going to have on business, even though Trump said he was going to impose the tariffs, but people, I don't really think believed it.
I think you're right. Even though it was stated out in front that this was going to occur, I think most people thought it's not going to succeed, and therefore there's going to be so much pushback, it's going to get dropped. I think that's where most people, because obviously U.S. tariffs, even though most of my business is in Asia Pacific, it's such a big conversation that it impacts the world. And even out here, I think people would have been of the same view. Yeah, okay, there's a lot of talk here. It's not really going to be actioned and then in play for so long, but it's been a surprise for sure.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think I was actually talking to a client today, which I was very happy to hear this, is that because I coach on people, but I also have clients who were really just doing growth strategy, and a lot of it has to do with people. But we were talking today about how it is predictable for her that she's got 3 months that are just cyclically that are slow. And every good month that she has, she takes some out, right? And so she's got a chest of surplus to be able to get through the months that are she already knows are going to be the revenue's going to be down.
Yeah, excellent. So
Yeah.
that's more of a financial plan, and that's good.
Right.
That war chest doubles as both a rainy day fund, but it also can be the fund for your growth initiatives. Once you get to the
Right.
point where you want to start saying, okay, what other areas of the market can we capture? Where can we expand some margins? What do we need to do that? Right. But again, it's really tough investing in your business when you don't have extra cash set aside. So it's like the first thing is almost building a business and running a household is not all that different in some ways, right? You want to have a rainy day fund set aside in case things hit the skids, right? And then you want to have what's on top of that, the ability to fund new growth initiatives to make your business better, add a deck outside, right?
And
That
there
sort of
you
thing.
go. There you go. Love that. All right. So, what's one unconventional habit or mind that's helped you grow your business? Would you say?
So, unconventional habit or mindset. I have always been a big questioner of the established way of doing things. And I think that's probably the single biggest. It's made things tough sometimes, right? Where probably as a younger guy, instead of trying to butt heads with the established way of doing things, had I been more interested in kind of cozying up and having a nice aside to the established way of doing things, life probably would have been easier. But you definitely can have some good success if you're prepared to question the established way of doing things, come up with a better way of doing it, then have the perseverance and the resilience, again, you're going to bump your head a lot, to push through those barriers. So I think as a very young person, I started kind of questioning the world around me. Is that really the best advice? I remember growing up in the 80s on the East Coast, always being told that eggs were terrible for you. You're supposed to eat General Mills and Post cereals. And I remember that doesn't feel right. Right. So I think that's an example from childhood that lo and behold, 25 years later, we have figured out actually the sugar in the cereals maybe wasn't as good for you as all the nutrients in the eggs. But hey, so just questioning the established way or wondering if what I'm being told is the truth or if what I'm being told is perhaps because it helps benefit the person telling me. And when I've gone into new markets to provide new services, mentioned earlier in the call, I've had a number of times they say, we don't need that, we're just fine here. But of course, that's not the truth. That's them trying to protect their patch. And you just have to first realize that's what's occurring and then decide to either have the resilience and the persistence to push through that. So I think questioning everything has been one of the bigger reasons why I've been able to do what I've done.
That really resonates with me. And I'll tell you why. Because not for the reasons that you just stated. Here's, I think, the other way to apply what you're talking about, which is that so often I work with people who start from this is my story, this is the way I see this. How should I respond? How should I react? What should I do about this? And so often, the reflection that I give back to them is I think you need to rewind a little bit further back, right? So we're so embedded in our own story about how we see the world, about other people and their motives and how they're treating us and all of that. And then you have an upsetting interaction with somebody. They send you an email, you have an upsetting, and then they'll come to me and say, okay, how should I respond to this? And I'm like, let's actually question your story around this, right? Because so often it's a you problem, not a them problem.
100%, or how you're interpreting, right? No,
Exactly.
looking or always questioning the established way of doing things helps when you're trying to kind of like break into new markets, but it also helps when you're just margin enhancement inside a business,
There
just
you
the nuts and
go.
bolts. You're like, hold on, why do we pay that subscription, right? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? And if the why is not a really good why, right? If the why is not directly tied to bringing revenue on or delivering the good or service, it may not be needed, but it's highly likely that it can be done cheaper. When you take that kind of questioning mindset,
Yeah.
it helps on the macro and on the micro level.
And the other thing that occurs to me around leadership and management is being curious. Because there's a way to say, just curious, like, why do we do it this way? What's the value of this subscription to the work that you're doing? Versus either coming in hot saying, like, why are we paying for this? And I think it's really having other people get curious. Like, I think that's a big leadership thing that doesn't always translate. It doesn't always happen. You don't always create this situation where this affects your work from where I sit. This isn't the conversation you're going to have, but like in your head, like from where I sit, this seems superfluous. It seems like we don't need to be spending money on this. Here's the thing is that in the important questions are, what does it do for you? Tell me about this so that you can make an informed decision. You can ask the questions, make an informed decision versus just coming in with edicts.
100%. And if you want to tie that back into leadership, same way, right? That curiosity component can be infectious, and it can be infectious in building your company culture. If you're leading by that example, right? And you're leading by lots of always be learning, questioning, be curious, and you're doing these things, and the people around you see you doing these things, before you know it, even when they're not trying to, they start to emulate you a bit because people model what they see.
That's right. And if you're just coming in hot and it's top down leadership all the time and you're just telling people what to do all the time, listen, it sometimes somebody's got to be making decisions, just like you said, right? I believe exactly what you said before. You've got to gather the information and then you've got to make a decision, right?
100%.
And this swirly thing around the consensus, I agree with you, right? That is not the way to make business decisions. And I think there's a lot of actually research that says that people need to be heard, they need to be considered. And then you make the decision, and it's with the listen, everybody had their input. We made the
Right.
best decision that we could. Like, everybody's got to hop on this train,
Yep.
right? That's an expectation versus, listen, business is not kumbaya. We're not
Right.
sitting around holding hands and waiting for everybody to feel the right vibe.
Yep. 100%. And if you can figure out how to have your best decision makers be the people making decisions, super bonus points, because oftentimes your best decision makers, your best critical thinkers aren't necessarily the most senior people. Not, sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes the best builder, sometimes the best hands-on builder, building entrepreneur is not actually the best decision maker. But having the self and then situational awareness to be able to get to those things definitely will help contribute to ensuring success. Because if you say, "Oh no, you're the board chair," okay, the board chairs never build a business. They might be able to give you some good ideas on governance. I hope they can. They should have at least been an audit partner at some point, so they should know their way around the audit process. But if they've never done hands-on business building themselves, they're not really going to be able to share and encourage and motivate the business builder or whoever your lead entrepreneur is, whether that's your chief executive or your chief operations officer or your general manager, because it's not something they really have any experience with. So then you really want to find someone else in the organization, maybe that isn't the most senior, but that has the relatability there for that particular person, and mentor them that way. Or bring in somebody else from outside the organization that has that history and has that experience. So they've got the relatability there. I think people and companies make a ton of mistakes not having the right people in the right places, not having the right people making the right decisions, not having the right people encouraging, leading, motivating. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. I want to take us home with just one last question for you. Because actually, what we were just talking about, I kid you not, Michael, we could talk about that. I know the two of us, we could literally talk about that for days. And
100%.
I want you all, listener, and Michael, I want you to understand the amount of restraint that I have by wrapping up with this last question and not going on with the 5 to 10 things that popped into my head while you were talking. Okay, so last question is about imposter syndrome. And it's really a two-part question. Because I think too, listen, if you're listening to this on audio, I'm going to call you out here. You're a white guy, right? You're a white male. And I think that there is a lot of pressure on you as a white male to show up in a very particular way. Especially you're a successful entrepreneur, right? And I think society really puts a lot of expectations on you, and maybe you put them on yourself as well. I don't know. But I think it's really important for our listeners for you to break it down for them. So, what kind of triggers you or gives you where you feel that twing where you have a lack of confidence? And then what do you do about it? What are some tips?
So, like self-doubt would be, I guess, how I would more wrap that up. And it comes often, right? So, especially when, if you go back to a couple of the other things that I've hinted at, you don't necessarily need to seek consensus, right? So, you're already confident enough in your own aptitude that you don't need to go and seek consensus,
Okay.
right? And hopefully, you found yourself in a position where you are making decisions, and those are big material to your business decisions. And hopefully you're the right person for that, right? Now, if you've done all of those things, and if you ever determine that you're not the right person for that, because maybe you're really good on the tools, you're a fantastic engineer, but you're not the world's best decision maker. And of course, the quality of your decisions can be shown in the data over the last 10 or 15 years of your life, too, right? So it's real, but it does have measurable consequence. You can see it. The biggest thing for me specifically, that I'm already comfortable not needing consensus, is just, and I get self doubt sometimes on decisions where I don't have a high degree of confidence. I would need a degree of confidence, or else you'd be rudderless. So you want to do your homework, you want to get to a point where, but sometimes a decision might be a 60-40 decision, right? Hopefully you're not at a point where you're 51-49, but hopefully it's at least a 60-40. But if it's a 60-40 decision and you've got other co-founders or other senior managers or other directors that think contrary to what you're, and you have to move forward and make that decision anyways, I think that how you get through that is that you act, right? You do the best you can with all the intel that you have, recognizing that we're never going to be perfect. But if you're an 80% quality decision maker, you're already hitting it out of the park. And just to act, and always recognizing that there are very few acts that can't be pivoted or at least adjusted. So I would say when I'm confronted with self-doubt or imposter syndrome, as long as those are associated, I think it's to act and just trust your instincts, trust your experience, right? Again, the more time you've spent in business, the more time you spent in life, you actually will have developed a track record. That track record is measurable, right? I don't want to get personal, but don't take marital advice from someone that's been divorced 3 times. They've got a track record. If you've got a track record in business of being a good decision maker over a long period of time, then trust your decisions. But then, of course, don't be so attached to them that if you learn something new in the future and new data presents itself, you're too stubborn to pivot.
Yeah, I think that's really good. That's really good advice, and appreciate your candor. I think it's really helpful to hear. All right, friend, we did it. Michael, thank you so much for spending this
Sure.
time and for giving great. Was a great conversation, giving great advice. And like we have talked about, I think somebody needed to hear what Michael had to say today. And I appreciate Michael. Thank you. I appreciate you listening. This is Unconventional Wisdom, about conventional wisdom. You got to do all the things. You got to and share and download and all the good stuff and go out there and be a better human.
Cliches retire, we set them free, shaking the ground with epiphany. Fresh thinking loud, it's our decree. Unconventional wisdom dancing on the beat.